everyone, what's up? This is Simon from Devdectic, back with the second part of our JSON Web Token authentication tutorial. So in the first part, we've created the server, the API that allows us to register, to log in, and then get back a token. In this second part, we will now build the Ionic app using Angular to implement the simple authentication mechanism to log in, save the token inside our local storage, and then make authorized requests to the API later on. So let's do this. I've created a blank new Ionic 4 project, currently using beta 15, I think. And also I already installed two more packages. First is Ionic Storage, save the token. And the second one is a JSON Web Token helper from Auth0. That will help us to check if the token is deprecated and also automatically append the token to any request of the Angular HTTP client. Okay, so with those two plugins, and of course, if you want to use it on a device, you should also add the SQLite plugin. Perhaps I've added it recently, yeah. Like Ionic Cordova plugin, add Cordova plugin SQLite storage. All right, but what we're going to do now is, first of all, create a few more pages. So we will create a page login, and we also want to have an inside page that we will later also protect using root guards. So everything included in this example. All right, login and inside. Next to the pages, we can also already remove the home folder. We will set up our own routing again. Next to the pages, we also need a service. So let's do this in the folder services auth, which will be the service to handle all the authentication stuff. And then a second one called auth guard, which will be the root guard that we can apply to our inside root that automatically checks if the user is allowed to enter a certain page. All right, I think in terms of pages, that's everything for now. So let me already bring up the Ionic serve, and then we can continue with, first of all, the app module, in which we need a few imports. So this video is quite code heavy. You can check out the according tutorial below the video. And at some point, I will just bring in some stuff. So as we see, we need the HTTP client module, of course, to make any HTTP request. We need the Ionic storage module for root, so it is initialized for our app. And finally, we need the JSON Web Token module as well for root. And in here, we have to provide some information. And to provide the information, we first of all create a little factory, options factory, simply up here, that will get a reference to our own Ionic storage that we will later inject through here. And in this function factory, we will return a token getter. So a simple function that will be called to get the token from wherever it is stored. And what we also need, since the later version, is the whitelisted domains array. And in this array, I will put in localhost 5K, because this is where my API is running from the first part. So of course, make sure you have the first part finished, you have the server running on your machine, or if it is hosted on something like AWS or Heroku, of course, add that URL here. For the token getter, we simply have to specify where our JSON Web Token is stored. So the JSON Web Token module here can automatically append the token, and we will have it simply at access token. Bless you. If you hear strange noises in this video, it's because I'm sitting our little 8-week-old girl right there. So any strange noises will come from her, not me. Okay, we got the token getter for the access token, we got the whitelisted domains, and now we need to pass this factory to our JSON Web Token module. So simply say provide for the JSON web token options, and then use the factory. So this is a common pattern we have used with, basically it's the same like here. We've used it in different places. If you want to specify a mock implementation for an Ionic native package, you have something like this. You basically use a factory or use class and provide your own implementation for something. So here we go with the JSON web token options factory. And finally, because we need to pass in a reference to Ionic storage, we also need to define dependencies, which is storage, and now in uppercase, because this storage is a reference to the storage we imported from right here. All right. I think there's a tiny issue. Okay, yes, we have to wrap it in this options provider, and then the errors are gone. We got this, we got that, and we got everything in place. Okay, great. Next step, heading over to our environment. We don't really need this step, but I just want to show you with Ionic 4 we can use the Angular environment. So simply specify something like HTTP localhost 5000, and this is now the development environment, and we could have something different in here. So in here you might have like Heroku whatever URL, and then when you build your app in the end using the prod flag, so which basically means something like Ionic Cordova build iOS prod. In that case, the prod environment would be injected into your project, and you don't have to switch between any URLs that you've set up for development and production. Okay, great. So we got the environment set up as well. So let's head over to the authentication logic. All right, baby girl seems to be happy again. Let's go through our authentication service. Now I'll just bring in the whole class for now, and we'll go through it step by step. But there are a lot of topics we have to talk about, and I don't want to make a mistake in here. So again, you can find the code in the tutorial link below. So first of all, I'll specify our access token key again. So this is basically the key for the value, the key where our token will be stored. It's the same, of course, like the one we used right here. So our authentication service will then use the URL from our environment, as we've seen in the step before. It will have a little user object, which we don't actually have to or don't need really. But what we need is the authentication state. And this is a behavior subject, which is a special type of observable. In other files, we will subscribe to this authentication state, and the authentication service will then emit new values. So the app component which we will use will automatically know if the authentication state has changed, and then we can switch the pages just like we did in some Firebase tutorials previously. All right, so what we're going to do is inside the constructor, first of all, once the platform is ready, check if we have a token stored previously. So in the check token, we will do exactly this. We will try to get the token from the storage, and if the token exists, we will perform some action. If not, no problem, so the user is not logged in. But if we get the token, we then check, so using our helper to decode the token, and the helper is actually, again, coming from the package we installed in the beginning. And then we check if it is expired or not. So if it is not expired, it means we got a token, it seems to be valid, so why not log the user in automatically? So we set the user information, and then we call next on the authentication state, so all the subscribers to the authentication state will be informed about the change, which means true, the user is now logged in. In any other case, we can also remove the token because it seems to be expired, so we don't really need it anymore. So this is the automatic stuff that happens or takes place right in the beginning of our app. Then we got the other functions. So we got the register function that makes a post request to our own URL/API register. Again, check the first tutorial and the API routes therefore. and then pass in the credentials, and finally using a little pipe to catch any error that might happen during the request. So perhaps we forgot to send some information, the password is too short or whatever. And then we will use the show alert function, just a little helper I added using the alert controller to present an alert. Just make sure that you got the new syntax for Ionic 4, which is promise-based for those components. Okay, that was the register functionality. Login is pretty much the same. Again, we do the post request to our API, but now inside the pipe, we do just like we did before the catch error, but inside the pipe we can now also add multiple other stuff. And what we're going to do is we tap into the result, which is basically just another step, but not really changing the result. So with map, we would map one value to another. With tap, we're just tapping into the value and do something. And what we do is, of course, upon successful request, to set the token to our storage, where we can later read it. We decode it to set our own user object, and we set the authentication state to true, which means we're now authenticated. Again, there's no further routing logic in this login function or the place where we will call this login function, because we will have it at the top level of our app to automatically handle login and logout functions. Okay, those are these. Then logout, of course, is to remove the token from our storage. Okay, and also, of course, we need to set it back to false, and we could also set the user back to null. But again, I don't think we really use the user object. It's just to show you that you can decode the token if there's some information inside that you need. Okay, the last or almost last is to get the special data. So we've added one route to our API called special that is protected and where you need to send the JSON web token to. Otherwise, you would get back an error. And this is the place where we catch if we get a 401 unauthorized error back. And only in that case, we display an error and automatically set the user back, because the token we have sent seems to be invalid. So there's no reason to keep the user logged in, and therefore we can simply remove the token and set the authentication state back. I actually forgot to remove, so in here I think we could also simply call the logout from here, which would make things a bit more easy, right? So again, I will note this to add the changes to the written version as well. Okay, otherwise we get the special data, and we don't have to add any more token to the request, because the package we installed will notice the request, will check for the Ionic storage, grab the token, append it as a header to our request, and then send it out. So no more any additional stuff that we need to do or any other package that we need. And finally, one last function, which is quite handy once we come to the guard function. Actually, it's the next step. We got this behavior subject, and you can subscribe to it like an observable, but at some point you might want to have the current value of the authentication state. And therefore you can simply call .value on it, which will simply return the current value of our behavior subject, which is really great for, let's see, the auth service that we need, because this one implements can activate, and it needs, of course, our auth service. And then, yeah, I'm here. Then we got the can activate, which will return a boolean. So a root is called, and this check is added to the root, and we return if this auth is authenticated. So is the user authenticated to, perhaps we should call the actual function. Okay, sorry for that. So now we can add this can activate check to roots, and then we will automatically check if the user is authenticated, and if not, access to those roots will be forbidden. All right, only 2 interruptions with a little girl so far. Let's continue. We got the authentication service in place and we got the authentication guard. Now let's move on to the app routing. In here we will find the home route, which was added in the beginning, but we will change this back to our login page. And the login page, of course, can be accessed all the time, but for the inside route, we actually want to change this a bit, because we don't want users, or in a regular app, you don't want users to access your protected pages or the member-only pages by the URL. And therefore, we will add the can activate right here. And in here, we add the auth guard service that we added right now. This will then lead to an automatic check for the authenticated state and return either true or false, so can access the page or cannot, or can activate and cannot. Okay, there's nothing more we need to add right here. Of course, if you have a tabs page after the login, check out my example how to create a tab bar layout. In that case, you would have another load children where we would have the routing for the actual tab bar in a separate routing file. And so we can protect all the routes of the tab bar with just one line. Okay, for now, let's move on to the app component. This is the place I talked about previously where we want to subscribe to the actual auth service. So let's use the auth service. And we also need the Angular router, so simply import them. And once we are ready, we will subscribe to the authentication state, which is our behavior subject. So subscribe, and then we will get back a state, which is basically true or false. And if the state is true, which means, for example, in the beginning, the app is started, the check token from the auth service is called, we see we got the token, true is added or called on the authentication state. We get to this point, and then the router can say, okay, then let's immediately navigate to the inside path. And of course, this will also happen when we log in, because it's the same block. And here we will simply go back to login. So whenever the authentication changes to false, so the user is unauthenticated, we will immediately go back to the login page of the app. All right, we're pretty close actually to finishing our app. We don't really see anything on the screen right now, but the only thing we need, let's see if I can bring in the login. There we go. Perhaps a bit smaller. Yes, like this. So the login page, of course, is empty because we still have to implement it. So let's do this now and close all of the other stuff we have open. So login, first of all, the module. We're going to use a reactive form. Therefore, we have to add the reactive forms module to the module of our page, and then we can continue. Again, I will bring in just the whole stuff from that page because I think the video is already pretty long and baby girl gets nervous. So the login page will have our little credentials form that is basically built up with an email that is required and a password that is both required and should have a min length of 6. If you want to talk about validators and reactive forms, there's another great course inside the Ionic Academy, which is my own coding school. So simply head over to ionicacademy.com if you want more Ionic training resources. Okay, back to topic. We will use the login page for both register and login. So on submit is the function that is added to our form. So when we submit the form, in that case, we want to log in with the credentials of the form. And as you can see, we don't need any routing or navigation action in here. Perhaps we could add some loading indicator here, but that's actually the only thing we need. Everything else will happen. So right here, login, okay, perhaps is fine. And then we set it to true. which means we will jump to the app component where the state changes and the router triggers navigation to inside. So nothing we have to add here. Same for register. Register is basically the same functionality, but after successful registration, we will also immediately call a login. Okay, I just assume it's successful in here, but it will automatically log in the user once he presses register. So I will also bring in the view because that's actually the most boring part of this tutorial. Simply Ionic for syntax in here. We got the form group that we've specified in the page, and on submit we will call the onSubmit function. And as you can see, the one button has a type submit, so it will trigger the ng submit. The second button has a type of button, which helps to use a regular button inside a form. And this button will not trigger ng submit, but it has its own click handler for register. And of course, both are disabled when our form is not valid. So we got the two elements connected with the form controls, nothing special here. So if we save all of this, we should now actually see our little login page. Okay, great. And the inside page, let's finish this real quick because then we can talk second more about what's happening under the hood. So the inside page is pretty much the same, or not the same, but not so interesting because we only got this load special information, which is the only really inside stuff in our app, which will get the data from the auth service and set it so we can display it in the view. Logout will only call logout in the auth service. Again, it will call next with false. App component handles this and brings us back to the login. Finally, we got a little clear token functionality to test some things out. So this will remove forcefully basically our storage token, access token, and then present a little toast so we know it is removed. But this is just for testing our own application and what we've created. So the view for this is as well, or as you can imagine, again, super simple. We only got those three buttons and the data right here. But now let's see how all of this looks in action. First of all, in those cases, I always like to simply restart my Ionic serve command. So let's wait a sec. Okay, it was really caching or Ionic serve error. So let's go ahead and try out our app. Register with some credentials, and it actually works, which is pretty strange because this is definitely not an email. So why is our form valid? Okay. I actually could set this, I think, to validator's email. So now it should only accept email imports for the name here. Anyway, just a small note, but of course I'll try to add it as well to the tutorial. So let's add my own simondevdactic.com, and the short password of course is not working. So let's use the real password and register. And there we go, we're now inside. We can now log out and use our inside. Let's try it. But because the token was removed from the storage, we're immediately sent back to the logins, and same counts now for if we are logged in. So devdactic.com, login, and now opening this in a new tab will work because the token is checked and we're still valid. So we're back here. All right, so now we can finally load the special information from the API. It's not spectacular, but the interesting part is the backend is actually using the information from the JSON Web Token that is appended as a header to get the user of this request. And that's how the whole logic is working. So this is why we get back the email right here. This is coming from the server, of course. So it works almost all the time. The interesting thing is that our JSON Web Token is only valid for 20 seconds. So you just noticed that I was brought back to the login page because the token was not valid anymore. And also, if I talk long enough, it will happen again, I'm pretty sure, but I'm not sure if it was 20 seconds. Yeah, you see, you're not authorized, and back at the login. And now the same thing will happen if I forcefully clear the JSON Web Token from the storage and try to load the information again. The HTTP request is not able to find the stored token, so the request is unauthorized, and then the whole logic in the background takes place. Okay, so that's how to build the front-end part of the JSON Web Token authentication. First part was the server with Node.js, second part now was the Ionic app using Angular and some packages to create the routing logic, the auth guard, the actual storage and saving and getting the token functionality. But it's pretty easy to implement this whole system, and it's one of the best systems currently or used in many places for authentication with a server. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe below to this channel, give thumbs up, do everything that you can to support the video and the channel, and of course check out the ionicacademy.com, which is my own coding school for Ionic, and I'd love to see you inside. So if you want to see more videos with me and the little baby, which is now asleep from my voice, so this definitely works, I'll catch you inside the next video. So have a great day and take care.